Good morning, welcome to the third and the last day of Ciência 2025, today especially dedicated to Europe. On this plenary session, with the theme Portugal in the AUR and framework programs, we are pleased to welcome Marc Lemaitre, Director General for Research and Innovation at the European Commission, will present us with a keynote entitled The Importance of Research and Innovation for Competitiveness and Perspectives for the Future. Mr. Marc Lemaitre, we now invite you to take the stage to make your presentation.
Dear Minister, ladies and gentlemen, bom dia. It's a great pleasure to be here, all the more so because we are in, I think, fantastic infrastructures, and I would like to thank the Nova School of Business and Economics and Nova University more generally for hosting us today. I want to start by thanking Minister Alexandre and Secretary of State for Science and Innovation Kanyao for the very warm welcome that you offered me and the whole delegation of the European Commission and for giving us this great stage today. It's a very great pleasure to be here with you and see together with my colleagues the impressive work that Portugal is undertaking to push research and innovation efforts, which is fundamental to build a robust European research and innovation area and improve Europe's innovation performance. Ciência 2025 is very timely. Indeed, next week, the European Commission will put forward our proposals for the new EU budget, covering the period 2028 to 2034. And a number of further proposals are in the making, so today is really a perfect opportunity to discuss more broadly how we can improve collectively at the EU level and at member state level. Let me briefly outline what I would like to cover in my remarks today. First, I will say a few words on the current challenges and opportunities for research and innovation in Europe and why they are so crucial at this pivotal moment. Second, I will highlight the achievements and impact of our flagship program, Horizon Europe, and Portugal's strong contribution to it. And finally, I will share some thoughts on the pathways forward, including how we can strengthen our collective efforts and make Europe more sustainable, innovative, and competitive. We are clearly in very turbulent times, and Europe will not succeed to navigate them if we do not acknowledge the importance of research and innovation as a key compass to guide our route towards higher competitiveness, and if we do not take decisive action to bridge the existing gap against other major global economies like the United States or China. Both Portugal and the EU overall are undergoing deep transformations. We face challenges related to the green and digital transitions, security, and the competitiveness of our economy. The last 2 decades have taught us that Europe's competitiveness depends on our ability to start a new age of innovation and ingenuity that finds its translation in the market and in higher societal value. To maintain global relevance and to drive economic growth, we must put research and innovation, science and technology at the center of our economy. Currently, despite many efforts, the EU is trailing behind international peers in terms of total R&D spending as a percentage of GDP. In 2022, the R&D intensity of the EU stands at 2.2%, lagging behind China, which is at 2.6% and growing very fast every year. The US at 3.6%, Japan at 3.4%, and South Korea at 4.9%. What have we said on this? In the year 2000, in fact, in Lisbon, through the Lisbon strategy that we agreed together, i.e. 25 years ago, we set formally a 3% target for R&D, and we are still very far from it today. We have only seen a slight increase in total R&D intensity, from back then 1.8% to the 2.2% I mentioned. This is both due to lagging public and private R&D investments. So let's put it bluntly, the current trend is just not enough, and this really needs to change. But money is not the whole story. We also need to improve conditions for innovation to avoid missed opportunities for innovation-led productivity growth. For this, we are preparing new legislative acts that will reduce the fragmentation of research in Europe to leverage our full potential working together. We are also preparing new measures that will help reduce the barriers that innovators find in Europe when they want to bring their ideas into the market and find the scale that they need. And we are also working very hard to improve the conditions for innovation on key growth and strategic sectors for Europe, such as life sciences. We have just put out a strategy on life sciences, biotech, digital, or space. And of course, we are also working on ensuring that more European venture capital is available for companies to start and scale. There again, recently we put out a strategy for startups and scale-ups. Let me now turn to the second part of my remarks and highlight what we have already achieved together, in particular through Horizon Europe, our flagship program, and how Portugal is making an excellent contribution to Europe's success. Innovation is not sparked overnight. Investment in science can take 20-25 years to reach the market, with little difference between scientific fields. In this context, the EU's framework program has supported R&I in Europe for more than 40 years, and its importance has grown continuously over time, and I hope it will continue to grow in the next decade. The current program, Horizon Europe, is the EU's main instrument to support research and innovation efforts, totaling nearly 100 billion euros over 7 years and targeting the full spectrum of the research and innovation cycle. It includes several key instruments with proven success. To support bottom-up fundamental research, the European Research Council is our globally renowned flagship instrument. And young research talent is supported through the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions. Crucial in strengthening cross-sectoral and cross-border collaborative research are EU partnerships, the regular calls on collaborative research, and EU missions. And one of the more recent successes of Horizon Europe has been the establishment of the European Innovation Council, providing support to Europe's most promising deep tech innovations. And let's recall here, with great pleasure, that the EIC was born under the steer of then Commissioner Moedas. What of Portugal's performance in Horizon Europe? Put simply, it is strong. You rank 8th among the EU 27 member states in European Innovation Council participations, and 14th in the EIC's accelerator, i.e. the part with direct equity investments into startups. More broadly, participants from Portugal have already received over 1.1 billion euros in Horizon Europe support, placing the country above the EU average in EU contribution per inhabitant. And in fact, at this level, you have already reached the same overall level of support that you had over the whole Horizon 2020 period. So there is a very clear upward trend when it comes to Portugal's footprint in the Horizon program. The overall impact of Horizon Europe has also been confirmed by the interim evaluation published earlier this year. First, it has clear economic impact. €1 of EU contribution to projects is expected to generate up to €11 in economic growth by 2045. Horizon Europe also mobilizes further investments in R&I from both the public and private sectors. To date, halfway through implementation of the program, participants have already mobilized an additional 10 billion in co-investments. The EIC has supported by now 700 startups and SMEs in the first 4 years of the period. Since the launch of the EIC fund in 2022, it has crowded in over 2.6 billion euros of additional investments into EIC-supported companies, with a leverage effect of over €3 for every euro of equity invested by us. Second, Horizon Europe has scientific impact, with, for example, over 80% of ERC projects having led to scientific breakthrough or major advances in their field. Under Horizon 2020 alone, the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions have supported 65,000 researchers, and Horizon Europe is on course to replicate this success. So the framework programs have been a major contributor to advancing, for instance, climate and environmental research, including its significant contributions to the reports of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, reports which were fundamental to then achieve the Paris Agreement on climate change. And third, alongside economic and scientific impacts, Horizon Europe is a tool to forge international relations and has fostered science diplomacy and cooperation worldwide. And God knows that today we need international cooperation in science more than ever. Horizon Europe has been an amazing magnet, in fact, for researchers of the rest of the world. It has received applications from 194 countries overall and brought in a new wave of associated countries to the program, including New Zealand, Canada, South Korea, Egypt now. And of course, we welcome very much the return of the UK and of Switzerland to this enlarged family. Finally, I would like to share some thoughts on the way forward, on what we need to do together in the coming years to strengthen Europe's research and innovation performance and global competitiveness. Let me touch upon 4 pathways that are important in our view. The first one is a strong and self-standing EU research and innovation program in the next EU budget. And we don't have much longer to wait to see if the starting point will be exactly that one. In the last months, we have had intensive reflections and discussions on this. And these have led to the conviction that we should build on the proven success of the current program while acting on lessons learned from the interim evaluation and, of course, also the report by the independent expert group chaired by Manuel Heitor. The Horizon Europe budget is substantial, but still only a fraction, more or less 10% of the EU's total public R&D budget. It should therefore be well targeted towards actions with the biggest EU added value and closely coordinated and managed with the member states and independent experts to maximize impact and diffusion. This will mean for collaborative research more strategic prioritization in the future, in complex technologies and critical sectors, in line with the recommendations by Mario Draghi in his report on Europe's competitiveness. Second, we must encourage greater coordination between the EU and national R&I strategies, including through the upcoming European Research Area Act. This act we intend to put forward somewhere around the middle of next year, so there is plenty of time still to engage together and to find together the best approach to this future act. A critical issue we face in Europe is the fragmentation of R&I efforts, which can significantly undermine the effectiveness of investments across the EU. Think today of what is on everyone's lips, artificial intelligence. Have we really thought together about how we can pool our resources in order to have maximum impact? A more aligned approach will ensure that resources are more optimally allocated and used, while reducing redundancies and duplication. In this context, it is also crucial that member states act on country-specific recommendations. We have just put out recently new recommendations, and in fact, there is an R&I dimension to these recommendations for 26 of the 27 member states. We can support member states with our available tools in order to progress on these, such as our in-house Horizon Europe policy support facility. Third, to strengthen the valorization of science into marketable innovation, Europe needs a robust innovation ecosystem, leveraging public but mainly private sector engagement. By improving access to finance and venture capital for innovative businesses, we can build a solid basis for enterprises to thrive and provide the necessary support for the translation of ideas to marketable products. Our recently launched EU Startup and Scale-up strategy will pave Europe's ambition in this regard. Also, initiatives such as the European Innovation Council and its proposed Scale-up Europe Fund and the EU partnerships are crucial ways to leverage private investments. These schemes help de-risk early-stage R&D projects, encouraging private investors to contribute significantly. However, Europe and member states must do more to foster these innovations by ensuring an investment-friendly environment. An important avenue we can further explore is the use of innovation procurement to effectively use public funding to crowd in private resources and to create the needed demand. Fourth, an innovation economy also depends heavily on being able to attract and retain top talent. And I want to highlight this, as some of you here today are certainly researchers, possibly not only coming originally from Portugal. I want to focus on one of our core goals, making research careers in Europe more attractive and more sustainable. Currently, the EU faces challenges in securing this attractiveness of research careers and in facilitating researcher mobility across member states. Enhancing the attractiveness and stability of these careers along the lines of our Choose Europe for Science initiative is crucial to establish Europe as the best destination for innovators and researchers and ensure a continuous influx of ideas and capabilities. So these were the main reflections I wanted to share with you today. I could have gone on for much longer, but I won't, talking about how we want to simplify and speed up Horizon Europe, and I can assure you we are very determined to achieve that. How we can harness AI in science. This is another topic to which we will be turning and on which we will be putting forward proposals in the autumn. How we want to improve research and technology infrastructures across Europe. Again, we will be putting forward some ideas on that in the autumn as well. But this is a moment also, and first and foremost, to listen to views of the room. I would suggest a few very simple questions for that. What can we do together? What can we do better? And what do you need from us? And what would you like yourselves to contribute? So I'm very much looking forward to the roundtable discussion ahead, and I want to thank you very much for your attention, for your patience. Muito obrigado. Thank you.
We now proceed with the panel discussions moderated by Pedro Pita Barros, a full professor at Nova SBE and Science, 2025 Commissioner. We invite to take the stage. The invitation is extended to the speakers on this panel. Vera Aldeias, coordinating researcher at the Interdisciplinary Center for Archaeology and Evolution of Human Behavior at the University of the Algarve and also Science 2025 Commissioner. Luís Almeida from the Center for Neuroscience and Cell Biology at the University of Coimbra. Marco Manso, founder and innovation, director of Particle Summary. João Maciel, General Manager of EDP's New Energy Technology Center, and António Cunha, President of CCDR North.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks to The Voice for calling us all to the stage. And we had a plan of questions that we discussed before coming to this panel, but I think that I'm going to change that altogether now, because we have 4 questions from Mark, and I think that probably should start from there. Our planned initial question was just simply to say, what have we done well in the past that we can move forward to the next framework? I think that just puts together with your question, so I will leave it up to you to go in that direction. So, Vera, you are the first one. Please, what can we do together? What can we do better? How can you help? Well, how can you contribute with your research to this part in a way that helps to take better advantage of the next framework?
Yeah, those are key questions, aren't they?
Yeah.
So my side, I'm a researcher. So my experience with the EU is from fundamental research, from the Pillar 1, from this bottom-up strategy. So what can we do better? I think we have a lot that we are already doing well from this pillar. The idea of giving this bottom-up approach, this scientific freedom for us to come up with ideas, it's absolutely key for the success that we've been having. And this is something we need to nourish and keep cherishing for the future. So that we do it well, and we should keep doing well. Can we do it better? Of course. Yes, we always have to look for the improvement, right? That is the part of it. In my personal view of how we can do better is that, yes, there is a general directive within Europe, and then it is different in each one of the countries, right? We are a multitude of voices in Europe, which I think this diversity is something we need to harness and cherish, but it is challenging. So if something is at the European level very bottom-up, simplified and easy, sometimes we go into bring these grants, for instance, the ERC grants, into a country, and those difficulties of implementing these simplified ideas, they really find some barriers. And we can change that, right? This is something that is about simplification of the bureaucratic process, is about simplification of all the procedure, and give this freedom, keep giving this freedom, not only to get the grant, but then to manage our grants, right? Because without success in managing our grants, then we actually do not accomplish. How can we contribute? My fundamental research, very selfishly maybe, it's not one of them that can give innovation directly, right? I am an archaeologist, I study the past. So you think, this is done. But actually it's not the case. We all know that we need baselines for a lot of the challenges that we do today. We talk about climate change. What climate? Geologically has been changing, so what's our baseline here, right? We know we have a difference in rate, but we need to have baselines. but also for political reasons. Often the past is used in a way of appropriation of the present and of giving different ideas of nationality or whatever it is. The past counts, right? And the past is our memory. So in that case, it's extremely important to contribute, not only with direct fundamental research that has potential applications, but without past, without to know where we came from, we do not understand ourselves, and I think that's also important. So we can all contribute, is what I'm trying to say. From the more life sciences that we can see the pathway into innovation, from more theoretical human sciences that can also give us a perspective that is our culture. And without that, it's very hard for us to do better. I have more to say in how we can contribute, but maybe I want to pass the stage to my colleagues.
Thank you very much, Luís.
So I represent the CIBB, the Center for Innovative Biomedicine and Biotechnology, a research center in Coimbra, in the center of Portugal. And I'm very grateful for the support that we have been having from Europe. So we take advantage of these different instruments, such as the Marie Curie, the European Research Council, the European Innovation Council also, and particularly from the widening instruments. And so I would like just to highlight that the widening instruments have been critical for the development of our research, and I think they have been doing a lot of good to Portugal to attract talent, to attract resources. And one of the things that I think I would like to pass the message is that the widening should continue, and Portugal should continue to have access to the widening, to the teaming projects, to the ERA chair, to the excellence hubs. And all these kinds of projects can contribute not only to develop our research, to attract talent, but also contribute to innovation. That was one of the questions that was addressed. Portugal has done, I think, fantastically well in terms of increasing the number of publications. We multiplied by more than 6 the number of publications in the last 6 years. We attract much more funding. Just to give you an example from our research unit, we have been able to multiply by 4 the funding that we get from EU during the last 6 years compared to the previous period. So there has been a fantastic increase, but there are still issues, okay? So we are reaching the level of the European research area, but we are still not there. So we need the widening to continue to go on. And we have issues also in terms of patent production, intellectual property protection, and translation. So there is really an issue in terms of translation that is unfortunately not a unique problem to Portugal. It's a problem of Europe overall. We need to facilitate the process of translation. We need to facilitate all this process. In our case, in health sciences, we need to facilitate all the process that goes from the basic research, which I totally agree with my colleague Vera, that we should continue to support very strongly, because we never know when the results from a specific fundamental project will give an application. But of course, we need to promote the translation and find ways of doing this. Just coming back to these widening projects, in Portugal we have now 6 teaming projects. So very well more or less well distributed in Portugal. So 2 in the Porto area, 2 in Coimbra, and 2 in Lisbon. They bring over 200 million euros of funding, and they allow to focus on specific subjects. And this is also important to reduce this fragmentation that was mentioned, because it gives specific focus. In our case, in Coimbra, we have 2 main areas in these teamings: aging and gene therapy. And I think they will do a lot of good for Portugal and for EU for the next years. And I was glad also to hear about the life sciences strategy that will actually, from what I understood, promote a networking on gene therapy and advanced therapy medicinal products. So I think this is a great initiative, and Portugal wants to be part of that, of course. So I think we can do a lot in terms of this process of translation, also of bringing back economic development benefit for the EU, provided that the instruments that have been supporting us are kept and further reinforced. And I think with this, I can pass to my colleague.
Thank you
very much for the introduction. So, Marco Manso from a Portuguese SME, a startup. I would like to start by praising the effort that the European Commission has been put, in a way that also the governments in overall, within the research and innovation effort, which is very much a critical need. We want to prepare in terms of the whole of society that it is prepared for future challenges, but also generates the necessary skills and competencies to be producing innovation and new answers. It is also to be appraised as we look into now connecting the science into needs and into the industry, because this is how we build a virtuous cycle between how then whatever it's new which is generated can also be then be reflected in terms of the economy, in terms of the industries, in terms of society, then in terms of adoption. And that's how also in terms of Europe we can really build the necessary level of competitiveness when you look into how the other different continents are also progressing. And one of the things I think we as Europeans can be proud is of this freedom of thinking and freedom of creating, which this platform allows us to do so. I was mentioning some years ago, maybe thinking about connecting science to application would be forbidden. I mean, we are not looking into science in the right way. But everything has its role, so we can think more fundamentally in the way of free thinking, and we can think then is how to apply obtaining results. And really, this is how the virtual cycle can be obtained in terms of results. We would think then in terms of the programs which are being created, like the EIC, the European Innovation Council. This is very interesting because now we are connecting really to think what would be the results of the research. So what's next? And it's still very much, I think, a bit of a gap when we see how much we put into innovation and science, but the results sometimes are not in the same expression in terms of what's being. So this is very much needed. I think the EIC is really a good mechanism which could help then to leverage, scale up, and then reach in terms of industry level. Perhaps also in terms of the challenges for the future, what's next is then how to better link as well with the industry, with the whole chain, to make sure that really we do a better use of the results of the research, which I think is still one of the gaps in Europe that we need to leverage. I would just point that if you look into, for example, we had a very strong automotive industry, but now it's painful to see how we see from either from the US, even from Asia, how innovations are breaking through. And this is just one example of one of the sectors that we have. So yeah, this would be my intervention, so João.
Okay. Well, good morning to all. My name is João. I come from an energy company, and I run a research and development center. First, of course, is also to acknowledge the effort of the framework programs. Well, EDP has been with the framework program since the 1980s, more than 14 years ago. Myself, personally, I started when FP5 was moving to FP6. Then FP7, Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe almost halfway through, already past halfway through. And now FP10. How will they call it? Horizon Impact Europe. Well, it's a long journey, but first to acknowledge the importance in supporting R&D in Europe. As I said, I run a research and development center, around 50 researchers and around 40 EU-funded projects. But just to connect with the energy sector is also facing transition, or shall we call it a revolution, because we need to change in 25 years what took us 200 years to consolidate. But I'm just bringing this because that's where innovation, R&D is key. We must do things differently in order to be able to, well, to have a decarbonized generation, to have decarbonizing demand. We have all the levers on the grid, on storage, etc., that are relevant. So, I mean, research and development funding, namely European funding, has been critical in the energy sector. We've helped our grids become more intelligent. We've developed new renewables. Nowadays, we are working on automation to streamline the development of renewables, for example, or operation and maintenance. We are now starting as well to go deeply on decarbonization or electrification of industry. So many fronts which are relevant. And regarding Horizon Europe, I mean, Horizon Europe or these framework programs, I mean, they have lots of merits. I mean, and so I wanted to highlight this. When you understand the game, despite some complexity, it is a simple game. It's predictable. It's meritocratic. It's had lots of merits. It allows you to build an excellence network in Europe. You partner with all the top academic and companies in Europe. And it effectively does what it's supposed to do, which is to help cover technology risk. So it allows this benign relationship between public and private in supporting development of several technologies. For FP10, I do think we have an important dilemma to solve, which is we need to remain, FP10 needs to remain, let's say, the center point for science and research support in Europe, which means maintaining its global architecture. People know how it works, so let's not break predictability. And this is one. I think Mark alluded to this to some extent. But the other point is what was already commented today. We need this comes at a decisive time. We need to increase Europe's competitiveness. We need to generate impact from science. So on my perspective, there are basically two things that we need to pursue. One is on the, let's say, on the what. We need to make choices. Strategy is all about choosing. So we need to make choices on areas where where Europe is already leading or has the right competencies, the right environment to potentially lead. So this is on the what. On the how, there are, of course, many things that we need to work on the instruments to make sure that they are, let's say, more effective. We talked about EIC a lot. But for example, one idea from my perspective would be also to bring impact also to, let's say, to the applied science bit, to the societal challenges. Why not put a premium on impact? Why not bring pre-seed investment also on the societal challenges pillar in order to anticipate impact? And then there are many other topics like making shorter projects more impactful, streamline evaluation, a number of things, but I will leave it here.
Okay, thank you. Antonio?
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Minister, Secretary of State, and Marc Lemaitre. I have been here several times in these Ciencia meetings. My first big European program was under FP4, so a long time ago. And I have also been a manager of research and science and also of university, but today I'm here as a territorial manager. I'm here with the view of the territory, okay? Because it's in the territory that things happen, it's in territory that people live, and in this digital era is in the territories that we have to win the battle for carbon neutrality, is in territories that we have to face the environmental transition. So, under these very challenging times for Europe, of course, Draghi, Letta, Heitor, Ninisto reports are very, very important for me, but the report from the high-level group for cohesion is also a reference report for me, and we have to have this in consideration. Of course, we have tensions, and even these tensions were here under these 4 speakers that precede me. We have, I would say, a time tension. We have a time tension, the tension between the time that is needed for fundamental research and for this freedom of research that is legitimately required by the scientific community. But on the other side, we have the economy and the competitiveness of the economy that is demanding fast responses, fast answers to what is needed to lead to this already referred virtuous cycle that should feed this process. Because in the end of the day, we need to finance all this system. It's clear that Europe needs to put more money on research. China is putting more money that Europe is putting on research, and we need to have sources to generate that value. And of course, we have another tension, that is this, I would say, this territorial tension, this tension between to have a kind of a centralization of infrastructure, creation of critical mass, big groups, that is absolutely necessary for addressing certain topics of science today, that needs very big infrastructure and then very big groups in terms of human resources, and to have also a territorial equity, how these infrastructures are spread, how science, how technology is spread along our European landscape. So these tensions will exist. We have to find the balance, because if we don't find those balance, of course, I'm afraid we will not get the political support to go on with these policies. But in terms of a kind of a provocative way, I will make just 2 suggestions. One is, for instance, related to this question of the critical mass, and coming to the example, to the very nice example of DRC grants, if a medium-sized university have a professor or researcher that get an ERC grant, of course, they will be very happy, but in the end of the day, perhaps they will face the problem that this researcher will be hired by some bigger university that will come and will get it, okay? So, in a provocative way, perhaps we could take ideas from what is done in a very successful area that is soccer, football, and when PSG come to get a soccer player in Braga or something like that, sometimes they pay a training fee or something, because this player was trained by this group and he should receive something to support this. This is a little bit crazy concept, but I suggest you to go on to go further on this idea that perhaps could help to go on this way. Of course. Another thing that, and I think someone already said that, supported that the majority of things that have been done in FP9 were reasonably good, but of course we should go deeper and go deeper in focus, go deeper in simplification, and of course, using my experience being also manager of an Interreg program, the Atlantic Area Interreg program, is we need to have much more flexible ways to link programs and to link financing of programs from different ways. To try to combine programs is in a certain way a nightmare. A last comment, and I will use words of DG Lemaitre yesterday evening. Of course, we are very much today to engage science, innovation, and entrepreneurship. today is almost accepted by everyone, but I fully agree, and in fact I have been stating that on my speeches at North. Creativity is a key word, because creativity is what can make the difference in the products we have to develop, in the products that make the difference, in the products that can feed that virtuous cycle of creating value that that has to be the unique way that we should go through to develop European competitiveness. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This was a very good first round. So let me challenge you to a second round, because there are a couple of topics that have permeated all the discussion, but I'm going to focus on one, on particular, on one part that was mentioned in all the things that were said so far, and that's fragmentation. Because if you talk about fragmentation, you have fragmentation at different levels. You have European fragmentation across countries, you have inside countries fragmentation, and we have fragmentation inside institutions. And reducing fragmentations means that you have to choose one of the following things. Either you want mergers, either you want networks, either you want exit of the smaller things, either you want entry of more larger things. And so my question to you is, how do you see the best way to reduce fragmentation from the perspective of your field, your institution, both at national level and European levels? Vera.
Okay. I think fragmentation is a very broad word. It can indeed have many meanings, because, for instance, from the fundamental research perspective, the ERC is phenomenal, right? Because good ideas don't depend on geography, right? And it's this decentralization that is a powerful thing, because we only polarize clusters of this big institute or that big institute. It's not fragmented, but it's narrow-minded, right? And it's interbred, because it's the same people always thinking. So this decentralization, I don't think it's fragmentation, right? It's a plus that we have. And I'll give you the example of my research center. In 2017, my research center were very little more than 10 people, a bit more. Now we are over 60. We have 6 ERCs in the last 5 years, and we have 7 Marie Curies, okay, in the last 5 years, because we normalize applications, okay? So within the center, there is the opposite of a fragmentation, right? We have this idea of talking together, of dialogue, of bringing ideas, of becoming completely sharing. Because the moment you think about this idea of fragmentation, for instance, in terms of competition, right? Everyone just talks about their own thing, the ideas also shrink. Right? So this is something I think it's very good in terms of decentralization of science and where do you put ideas. That for me is not fragmentation. There is 2 other points I would like to say. One of them is about training, the other one is about budgets. I'm not sure if they go with fragmentation, but I'll go ahead and say them.
Sure.
So it goes with this idea of decentralization. Yes, it's very good, but indeed we can think that a lot of the training of the management or of these ideas of becoming normal to apply, those are indeed centralized in the big centers, right? Whereas normalized to apply to ERCs. And in Portugal, we are doing much, much better. But it's still not completely normalized to apply for this European fundings, okay? And this is an idea because I think of training to think that we can do it, of course, but it's also in terms of the management, of the support we get in the institutions. So I think we do need to be successful, that it's not everything fragmented in sense of clustering, but there's effective training of the universities, that there's careers of managers that are scientists that can help us to apply for this grant in Portugal, but in other countries. I think that's completely normal. I came from the Portuguese diaspora, right? I was in the United States, I was at the Max Planck in Germany. I thought it was normal to apply, so I applied, right? And because I got it, I'll never apply again, so my success rate is just 100%. No, but this normalization, I think, is important. So this training, I think, is important. And I would say that this training within the universities, but to connect here with some of the innovation, it's also this idea of training and of research within companies. Okay? And here, maybe I don't know, maybe the EU has a lot of these mechanisms, but I think this would be a plus, to have research directly connected with places of startups or innovation, clear connections here. I think that would be absolutely essential. My last point is budget, you know, and I'm glad to hear that we may not be disappointed, right, in terms of the European part, but we also need the national part. So I'm taking advantage to have both, to say one cannot survive without the other, and I know we all want it, but we really have to strive to have it, because indeed, without this baseline budget and some independency, financial independency from the institutions that manage us, it's always very ups and downs, and we never know. And unpredictability is really the worst. So I said this in my opening speech, and I'd say again, yes, we don't have as much as we want, but whatever we have has to be predictable, okay? And that's super important for you and for the national budgets.
So, regarding this fragmentation and organization of the system, my view is that we need a certain critical mass to produce science, and also to have the supporting staff and all these offices that are clear, very important to be successful. A grants office is critical and was part of our success. A grants office, it's only possible if you have a minimal critical mass. So in my view, research units should have a minimum size. I think it is a very unusual that a research unit with 10 researchers is so successful as the one of Vera. Typically, you need, in my view, at least 50 researchers to create the critical mass, to have the supporting staff that will help on the grant management and all other things, such as the scientific platforms and other technology transfer offices and all this. So critical mass, in my view, is important, a certain minimum size. Also, I think the success of Portugal in terms of research production arises largely from the option that was done many years ago on building on research units instead of building on university departments. University departments did not provide the flexibility, the agility, and the will to make excellent research. The organization in research units separated or building on the university was fundamental for the success of the Portuguese research. Now, of course, we can, I will also take advantage of having also the Minister and the Secretary of State here. And so I think we can reform the system and build on these research units. In my view, for the research units that are connected to the university, they should become what we call organic units. Basically, they are like faculties inside the universities, and this gives centrality and the capacity to these research units to have a say on the government of the universities. And for me, this is fundamental. This is critical to make the university system in Portugal successful, and to shift the alignment of the Portuguese universities from teaching universities into research universities. So building new faculties driven by research in the universities. These, of course, these research units, these new faculties need staff, and for me it's very important that we have a support staff and we have a professional career for this support staff. And so these include people, as I said before, of communication, technology transfer, grant management, the project preparation. All these are essential for success. They should be supported to further increase our success. I think, just to give you an example, each euro that FCT gives us is multiplied by 16 in terms of funding attraction. And this is not unusual in Portugal. So these research units that have been well evaluated, in general, they do similar as the CIBB did. So I think we should really build on this. So these are my main messages. Of course, I have a list of many messages that I could build on, but I don't want to take all the time. But I will just point one that Mr. Lemaitre also mentioned, that is the simplification. And in Portugal, this is a major issue. It's in Europe, but in Portugal, it's even worse. So we have tremendous bureaucracy. We need a law that is specific for research, that allows us to do research and to order the traveling, that allows us to buy goods and services in a simplified way without having to go through the public procurement that is a complete nightmare and that hinders and blocks our research. And so I think that this message of the simplification is also very important at the European and at the Portuguese level. And with this...
Okay. That's a tricky question. Let's go to the basics in terms of fragmentation. Of course, fragmentation by itself, it's a negative connotation, would not be positive. But the opposite of fragmentation would be what? Concentration. Then you go to concentration, you go to the stiff structures big, which then become not so much innovative. So that's the downside. I would like to say that, so two things here. Of course, critical mass is important. Of course, the competencies which are built and so on, structure is important. But when you deal with innovation, you also need to deal with diversity. And we need to have also open to new ideas. I think there is the one pitfall, very big pitfall, is to think we know who the winner is. We know who is the innovator, but you don't. By experience, what we have is a kind of a dynamic ecosystem, which is evolving in time. You might have some favorites, but you don't know the winners. So in a way, what's very, very important is that to leave some room for the bottom-up approach, I think, within the Commission, which has been quite important. With the criticism is but when we go too much for open ideas, you cannot go for one and two. Then you are reducing the scope. And many innovation models would start from, let's say, having a group of, 10, 20, how much money you have, and then see how the ecosystem will evolve, and then go to separate steps of evolution in which then the best get trained. Because this is a competitive model. This is how the whole thing works. And it works with competition and also with merits and with results. So the word fragmentation, it's not positive, and I think we've seen in terms of, as we are within within this ecosystem also of innovation, how groups really evolve and build into very strong competencies, and we see within Europe the research centers, industry, universities, which really do achieve a good critical mass. But I really would really ask to keep also the dynamic and uncertain aspect of innovation, in which we also have maybe the smaller ideas, which starts with small, but with a number of a wider spectrum of candidates, and then which can evolve as the work goes into then what could be more in a clustered and more structured organization.
Thank you, João.
Okay. So, on my side, fragmentation. What comes to my mind is, for example, when we think about focus and impact, we think about big bets in Europe, areas where EDP can lead, as I said in my previous comment. And so I know there are many already transversal initiatives, like, for example, I would say this Green Deal or the specific challenges on EIC. There are already some transversal topics. But I mean, I guess to pursue these big bets, I think we need many times to break barriers. For example, I don't challenge the organization of the program, which I think is fine. But for example, within societal challenges, we have one cluster that deals with energy, one cluster that deals with digital. And to do things which are impactful, perhaps we many times need to break these barriers. For example, I do think that one thing is important in my field is to increase the speed and scale at which we can install renewables and grids that, in a way, to host them. But this is automation, digital, this is manufacturing. It's a number of things that come together to streamline that installation process. So, in my perspective, to make it feasible, we need to break those barriers and come up with some sort of integrated approaches to deal with these big bets. One second comment that comes to my mind has to do a bit with this. I think in Europe there has always been this dilemma between cohesion and excellence. So you need to pull the best to make sure that you do excellent science, but you also need to make sure that you keep some balance within development of countries, etc. And I think that, I mean, of course this is important, but I mean, namely regarding these big bets, I mean, our motivation should be to win, right? And to win means, for example, in areas where we are ahead of US and China, increase the gap. In areas we are behind, reduce the gap. So that means winning, and I guess to do that, perhaps we need to rethink this balance between cohesion and excellence in some form. Finally, fragmentation having to do with money. Money is not everything, but money matters. And so I think Mark said that Horizon Europe is 100 billion, and it's 1/10 of the budget for research and innovation globally in Europe. So this means we have like 1 trillion. It's a lot of money. And so I'm not sure if there's some further articulation that should be done between different instruments, different divisions. Because, I mean, of course, having this 100 billion is a lot. I don't know what will be the amount for FP10. I presume it will increase, right? Because this is a decisive moment. But I mean, finally, the last comment, not to leave it on money, is I mean, fragmentation also is the opposite of, in some form of focus. And so, I mean, when we go back to the original question on what we should do, I mean, I think we should be a lot focused. We have elected we call them hunting zones, our research areas, things that we really need to do, our must-win, things that we need to do. I presume that everyone does the same, but and then trying to match that with funding opportunities and pursue it in a focused way. I would leave it here.
Thank you. Antonio?
I'm lucky to speak after all these colleagues, and major things have been already said. Yes, critical mass is absolutely necessary. Critical mass in physical infrastructure and critical mass in human resources, I already said that. But of course, the different areas of research, of science, of technology are completely different, and I don't think there is a unique recipe for all of them. For instance, of course, if you speak about particle physics and a spallation source or something like that, this is a critical infrastructure that has to be in one place and with lots of researchers working on it. Of course, there are also another issue that we have to take into consideration, that we are also fighting, and it was already said, for attracting human talent, and sometimes to attract a foreign researcher, perhaps you will prefer to come to this nice Carcavelos research in front of the beach than to go to some place inland near Vila Real or in Bragança, where the environment from the social point of view is not perhaps so interesting. Of course, all that questions have to be taken in account. But so I think there is not a unique solution for everything, and that of course we can assure critical mass by the right networks, by the right combination, and because of that I really believe on the role of regional innovation systems that can cover that gap. For instance, coming down to specific examples. For instance, we are supporting at this moment, or we will support at North, a new innovation center in what we call Atlantic energy, so offshore eolic and other wave and other energies of those coming from the sea. And this will be done in a small city called Viana do Castelo with a smaller science and technological infrastructure, but it was almost imposed by us, if I can say that word, or if it was induced that our major scientific technological institute on that area in ESCTech has to be a partner of that project. And so we put our major player engaged on that project. So this is, we have ways to do this and to find the right solutions for the specific area that we are dealing with. On the opposite, and speaking about the Portuguese reality, for me, it's very difficult to understand, very difficult to understand how we have research centers, both, of course, research centers in universities and state labs on agriculture that are based in Lisbon or in Porto. For me, it's very difficult to understand that because there is, of course, no rationale behind that. So I think there is not a unique solution. It was already said, the opposite of fragmentation is concentration. Fragmentation has, of course, several issues related with efficiency and with the capacity of delivering really the results we are looking for, but concentration is not also good, and even by thermodynamic principles, when you have concentration, you have always bigger risks. And so I think the key word was already said. The key word is excellence, and no matter if you are more or less fragmented, what you have to achieve is excellence of what we are doing.
Okay, thank you. We have kind of 2 minutes. What I'm going to do is to make a quick summary and then give 1 minute to everyone, and we go over time. Like in football, we have 5 minutes more, as in football games. I think some of the issues raised here require science and a scientific approach. So one of the main things that was mentioned here was the question of size, which you can say about minimum efficient size to work. And that needs to be tailored to each sector, to each research area. I think that we need to think about properly how much do we know about the minimum efficient size in each area. That's one first thing. The second thing was simplification, which I could say like learn how to achieve the objectives in a simpler way. Bureaucracy was put there for some reason in the first place, then it feeds itself. And then the question is, what are the objectives that led to its presence that we can achieve in a simpler way with the instruments that we have now? That requires probably a scientific approach as well. The third one is to discuss and find the balances for the several trade-offs that were mentioned here. And there is these tensions between centralized and decentralized in research, like procurement for innovation is centralized innovation. Much of our system is based on decentralized innovation, which is going for the smaller part, which brings to a critical point that was mentioned by Mark in his speech, that we think we need to, for the European level, we need to think in a broader sense, because we have an ecosystem in the US that is very integrated, much more integrated than is the European one. We have a Chinese ecosystem which has lots of funds and government direction. And we have Europe stuck in the middle with lots of fragmentation. Let's try to avoid, I will change the word in a minute, for a moment, but let me change this to think about how can we leverage what is the strength of Europe, which is diversity, into a strength instead of being a weakness. And so sometimes fragmentation, when linked to minimum efficient size, is one thing. Fragmentation linked to diversity is a different thing. And so probably what should we use is not fragmentation, but avoiding pulverization, which is a very different thing. And so I put the focus on diversity as one of the major strengths that we can eventually leverage. And I think all of those were on that part. Then there is one other important part where the European Union needs to work on. And that's something that was underlying most of the things. That is, if we reduce fragmentation by concentrating, then how do we share the gains from that concentration? How do we share the gains from concentration, one activity in a certain European country or in a certain region or in a certain institution? So distribution of gains is not something that, that is a commitment from research and development areas. It's not for the research part, but it is something that governments and the European Commission need to think well. If they want to change, they need to think about how they do this. The other part that was also clear on the discussion was the distribution of tasks across the value chain. I don't know if you noticed, but there is this huge thing that we want predictability on the research side for having the time to do the research, that's for sure. But people on the business side are used to go much faster.
Yep.
Well, we are not all born equal, and some people will be good with a long time of doing research. Others will be good in translating that part into part. And the question is, what is the best way to make this task distribution? And that's probably where we can find tools that can make that job better. And we are still struggling to find those tools at national level and the European level. But I think that's really something where science and a scientific approach can also be useful on these elements. Given that I took these 2 last minutes, I'm going just to give 1 more minute to each of you to have a final statement, and then Antonio will have the final last words of the game. Vera.
But I think you kind of said it all, but I would just like to point out the elephant in the room, which is we all know that science is under threat worldwide, right? And indeed, in Europe, we have a really hard task because we are diverse, and it's hard to find common ground. But I think we have to nourish that diversity. That's also our power. It's hard in terms of the amount of meetings we probably have to do, but I think it's very much where we are powerful here, because we are diverse and we have that powerful. And to do that better, I would say simplify mobility within and out of EU for research, for instance, or for innovation. This needs to be a fast track for innovation and research, for movement of people, so we can cherish the diversity we already have and increment it.
Okay, I will continue on this question, and I think the diversity of Europe is actually very attractive. We are in a moment where a lot of Americans want to come to Portugal and to Europe in general. We need to take advantage of this and to nurture these people that want to come to Europe. There are some instruments from Europe that are being prepared on the ERC. I applaud what has been done. But I think we need to do more, and particularly at the national level, more than the money, what is needed is a simplified process. High-level scientist that wants to come from Portugal needs to have a facilitated visa access so that he comes in a non-bureaucratic way to Portugal without any issues. And so we need to take advantage of this particularly moment that is favorable to us. And just to finish, I think we need to professionalize our research units. We need to have qualified support teams. And I think in general, research needs dedicated legal tools, stable funding, clear career paths for both scientists and for the support staff. And without these, we have the risk of having talent going to China, to US, or other places, and the potential will be lost. So I think we have a great opportunity here, but we have to use it well.
Okay, in short, please, this has to continue the support to research and innovation. It's critical, it's existential, I think, also for our way as Europeans. Also keeping in the loop and be proud of Made in Europe, our industries manufacturing, greener, of course, more sustainable. And I think what we have here in terms of the support is really critical that we can achieve that.
Okay. Well, on my side, regarding FP10, let's keep what's good. Let's have it as the key pillar for supporting research and development and innovation in Europe. So stable, predictable, meritocratic, not so much bureaucratic as other programs, and so fit for purpose. Let's keep what's well. And then let's think creatively on how to effectively address those big bets from Europe so that we can be competitive and reduce these gaps from our, let's say, competitors. Finally, a bit biased, but of course I do see the climate and energy transition and crisis as an opportunity for Europe. It's an area, renewables, etc., where Europe is already leading, and we do see this as an opportunity to to work both on the sustainable side as well as on the competitive side.
Thank you. Antonio?
I will finish with this issue of the diversity concentration tension. That for me is a critical aspect, and I think this should be addressed, or really this should be addressed by networks of different geometries, different geographies, and different governance systems. And so for me, what perhaps we need, and is important, is to have a kind of an agreement, a kind of a rationale inside Europe and our countries, and in this case Portugal, what is the level of this networks that have to be addressed at European level, what are those that have to be as a national level, and what are those that have to be addressed at a more regional level. Of course, we will have always an overlap between these levels. This is absolutely necessary, and is absolutely the way to go through.
Okay, thank you all. It was a very rich debate, so I think they should give them a round of applause, and we'll leave the stage.
Many thanks to our panels of speakers. I invite to take their seats in the audience. For the final notes on this theme, we are honored to have the speech of the Minister of Education, Science and Innovation, Fernando Alexandre.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start by welcoming and thanking the Director General for Research and Innovation, Marc Lemaitre, and his delegation. The Research and Innovation Enhanced Dialogue that we started yesterday evening emphasizes the need for a closer interaction between the European Commission and the national governments, and we will certainly contribute for a better alignment of the European framework and the Portuguese strategy for science and innovation, and therefore for the development of a stronger and more dynamic innovation ecosystem. I would also like to thank Pedro Pita Barros and the participants in the panel for the very interesting discussion on the challenges that Portugal faces in research and innovation. Let me start by stating clearly that research and innovation are not merely horizontal enablers. They are pillars of Europe's long-term resilience, competitiveness, strategic autonomy, and society's well-being. Europe and its member states must increase investment in research and innovation, accelerate and stimulate a greater exchange between its scientific system and its innovation and business ecosystem to achieve greater social and economic impact. We should continue to invest across the full knowledge value chain, from fundamental to collaborative research to breakthrough innovation, addressing the innovation gap, as well as strengthening the widening measures that have been very successful in contributing to close the innovation divide. Fundamental bottom-up research feeds creativity and innovation, as was mentioned here before in the panel. Without fundamental innovation, there is no disruptive innovation. And without disruptive innovation, there are no breakthrough innovations that are crucial for Europe to overcome its societal and economic challenges. Therefore, the future FP must continue to protect bottom-up, curiosity-driven research. Investigator-led science is Europe's trademark. Portugal reaffirms its support for strengthening the European Research Council, including its financial envelope and governance independence, to ensure that bold, high-risk ideas have a home in Europe. Investment in fundamental research is also crucial for Portugal to overcome its defining challenge, to become a leading innovator. To increase productivity and wages, and thus society's welfare, Portugal needs to change its economic structure that should be increasingly based in high-skilled work, knowledge, and innovation. That is, Portugal needs to change to a new paradigm, to change from the made-in to the created-in paradigm. Adequate funding across all stages in the R&I cycle is essential to foster synergies between different funding sources and to promote collaboration between academic and non-academic sectors. Collaborative projects have increasingly emerged as a central pillar of European competitiveness. Portugal calls for a stronger support to science-based startups and scale-ups in complementarity with ERC research. Bridging the value of that in deep tech innovation is essential, especially through a more agile and expanded European Innovation Council. The attraction of scientific talent is a strategic pillar for Europe's competitiveness and autonomy, especially amid geopolitical instability and increasing global competition for highly qualified human resources. Portugal is fully committed to academic freedom and the autonomy of its higher education institutions. We have just sent yesterday to higher education institutions a new institutional framework, a proposal for a new institutional framework that has as its central pillar to reinforce the autonomy of institutions. So we really believe that academic freedom and the autonomy of its higher education institutions are essential conditions for them to fulfill their mission, strengthening our democracies, contributing to the advancement of knowledge, and fostering economic and social progress. Europe's competitiveness depends on building a true European higher education and research area, ensuring the free movement of students, professors, researchers, as advocated in the latter Heitor and Draghi reports. Eliminating fragmentation is essential for Europe to become a leading space for attracting researchers and thus to strengthen its role in providing global public goods in addressing major global challenges. Portugal is fully committed and actively engaged in the construction of a European area for higher education, research, and innovation. In this context, I would like to emphasize several projects that we are developing with Spain. The INL, the Iberian Nanotechnology Institute based in Braga, the AI Factory that will be based in Barcelona, the Atlantic Satellite Constellation, and the new Iberian Center of Renewable and Energy Storage that will be based in Spain in Cáceres. These are examples of the cooperation in research and innovation infrastructures that is a necessary condition for Europe's global competitiveness. Strengthening participation in European networks and consortia is essential to ensure access to resources, data, and strategic collaborations, avoiding the duplication and therefore promoting synergies in areas such as energy, health, or digital technologies. Portugal is committed to contributing to the strengthening of Europe's strategic autonomy by enhancing its participation in European networks and in networks with countries from both the North and South Atlantic and also, of course, China. In the next MFF, we need fewer and smarter rules. Lump sums, faster time to grant, and harmonized evaluations are key steps. But we also must ensure that FP10 remains accessible to newcomers, SMEs, and science-driven entrepreneurs. Bureaucracy should never be a barrier to a wide participation. Dynamic SMEs are crucial for generating innovation, high-quality jobs, and economic growth. While there are many SMEs participating in Horizon Europe, according to the midterm evaluation that was mentioned by Marc Lemaitre, their number is not increasing. SMEs participants are often partners in collaborative projects, which should enhance this part of the program and introduce further measures to facilitate access to funding, not only to SMEs, but also to startups and scale-ups. For instance, a comprehensive financial incentive package could be considered to further stimulate SME investments. This could include grants, tax benefits and subsidies, as well as the creation of innovation vouchers and small grants to support collaboration between SMEs, large companies, and research institutions. In Portugal, there is empirical evidence, I have produced some of them, that confirms that stronger impact of industry-university collaboration on SMEs, namely on firm productivity and firm size growth. Portugal also emphasized the need for vertical and horizontal alignment between the European Union, national and regional governments. That's one of the reasons why we invited António Cunha to be here. We have Azores with us also, so thank you for coming. Because we really believe that we need this coordination between the different levels, European, national, and regional. Synergies must be a driver, not a challenge. This means shared roadmaps, interoperable rules, and simplification at all levels. Otherwise, we risk losing the momentum of impact. To promote a better alignment between European, national, and regional goals, the Portuguese government, in articulation with regional administrations, decided, this is just an example of that coordination and the importance of that coordination, decided that the national component of teaming projects must always include national funds, corresponding to 75% of national funding, and regional funds, that fund remaining 25%. With this funding formula, we showed that the government is committed with research and innovation, and we also stimulate the alignment of teaming projects with regional strategies and the other way around. FP10 is just not the next program. It is the next opportunity to define Europe's place in the world. It is also an opportunity for Portugal to reflect on the organization of its scientific and innovation ecosystem and to change it. Portugal's scientific and innovation ecosystem was built in the last decades by adding new layers that aimed at closing the gap between science and innovation. Now it's time to assess the system and to reorganize it in order to make it more agile in transferring knowledge from the lab to society and to the economy. Portugal stands ready to work with the Commission and all member states to ensure that the future program is ambitious, inclusive and transformative. Let us not miss the opportunity to shape a more resilient and innovative Europe. Portugal is fully committed to achieve this goal. Europe can count on us. Thank you very much.
This concludes our plenary session. Após o coffee break, recordo que as sessões paralelas da manhã terão início pelas 11h30 e lembramos também que esta tarde contamos com um conjunto alargado de sessões paralelas que decorrem entre as 14 horas e as 15h25 e entre as 15h35 e as 17 horas. Toda a informação está disponível no nosso site e app. Contamos com a presença de todos pelas 17 horas aqui no Atrium Ovion para a sessão de encerramento. Obrigado.